All
And
right.
well, hello. Oh my goodness. Happy Wednesday. Happy hump day. Happy another day. We are blessed to be above ground for another day for this particular episode and every single episode, every single weekday. Hello, every beautiful body out there. My name is Blair G. Hervey. I am the founder and CEO of The Corporate Strategist. I'm joined by my colorful co-host, my bestie, my soul friend of 20 plus years, the corporate strategist, independent consultant, diva speaker, self-proclaimed diversity geek, and buddy that I was just fussing with right before this call. So I'm just going to keep it real. D'Angelo Crane, it's good to see you as always.
Well, hello, Laverne to my Shirley. How the heck are you doing today?
Child, if I was any better, I'd be twins still.
It is always great to be back on the Black Diva Collective Live stage to share a little light, love, and laughter with all the great people. The other thing I'm obsessed with today, Blair, is the Pharrell Williams Louis Vuitton menswear fashion show. If you have not watched it, it is an experience, almost a religious experience. They have singing in it. It's a spiritual awakening. It's beautiful. It's everything I need to be. I was like, how do I work there? How do I was thinking, I've never bought a designer bag, but now I want one. It has to be Louis Vuitton, my first one when I save up after months and months and months and months and months. But anyhow, yes, it was. Have been obsessed with it for the last 24 hours, and all the people who were there, including Beyonce and Jay Z, of course. So.
I love, love, love that. My son actually sent me a clip. He is a fashion lover. I feel like everybody is in Paris this summer. I'll be in Paris next week for about a month studying fashion. So I was really excited to see it as well. Very, very inspired. And I always ask my son Trent, like, who is the next Virgil Abloh, after Virgil passed away? And I always felt like it was him, but it looked like Pharrell hopped right on into those shoes. So I am so excited to see it. But thank you for that caveat. And also a big, big welcome to our guest. Of course, we do have a wonderful guest today, Wendy Kleinfeld. We're excited to have you. How are you doing today?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I am so enjoying the dynamic between you two. I can tell you two are besties. And as far as fashion goes, oh my goodness, if you get a chance to buy a couple things while you're in Paris, that's the place to do it. It is so much cheaper there. It's a very economic choice. If you're going to buy designer, you also get tax back. So anyway, that's my spiel on fashion, but good for you. Awesome. I love this.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been there about 3 times before. And I've been getting so excited that I've been thinking in French lately. So yeah, we're ready. We're getting ready. But
Awesome.
to get us started, it looks like we have already got started with some great energy. But D'Angelo always has a great bit of a great segment to start us off with. So D, you want to get us started?
Yes, Sharina, thank you. Well, Wendy, we always around here, we ask, Blair asked the initial hello, but I'm asking the deep dive of hello. And the reason why we do that is because we want leaders to do that every day with what we call the art of the check in. And it's just a moment where we're saying, if you want to build vulnerability, empathy, and trust on your team, the way to do that is really get to know your employees and knowing what they're experiencing. And this really started when we think we were all experiencing the racial trauma in COVID of 2020. And associate said, I need to speak freely. I need to be honest that I'm not doing well today. And so we're encouraging leaders to do that. So we're going to do that right here, right now on the show. Wendy, how's your heart? How's your mind? How's your soul today?
Wow, thank you for that question. I don't think I've really been asked that recently. So, today I'm feeling excited. I am feeling like this is a wonderful opportunity because I don't often get asked what my experience is as an Asian American. And I think we'll kind of go into that. So I really appreciate that question. I appreciate anytime something happens that we see in the news that people reach out to me and say, hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling today? And I usually am saying I'm okay. Like I'm trying to tune out the noise, but I appreciate when people ask because that means you're noticing. You're noticing that the things that Asian Americans experience are also traumatic. And we'll go into it, but the model minority myth really does a lot of damage to us. And I think it's not, and it vicariously, I think, negatively impacts the Black community as well. So my heart's in a good place. I'm feeling at peace, but I'm also excited to be sitting here with you all today.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I love that. Blair, how's your mind, your heart, your soul, and your hair today?
Do you really want to know? Because listen, I'm a little overwhelmed today, but you know what? I'm so grateful. I'm grateful that I have things to be overwhelmed by. Amen. So, overall, feeling good, very spirited, a little hungry, but I'll be all right. D'Angela, how's your head? How's your heart? How's your soul today?
I am, yes, with you with being overwhelmed. And I also have a doggy in here, by the way. So I'm just making sure he's okay. He's fine. So if you hear someone barking or whining, it's because I have a little doggy in the room with me today. So that's where I am today.
Okay. Well, you know what? I've never seen you as a dog person. Are you going to be one of those people that picks up your dog and, well,
Uh,
okay.
no, I don't. No, I don't do that. We don't. I don't pick him up. I do pet. We do play, but not, as pick up, that's not
It's
me.
your thing. All right. Well, no worries. Well, thank you again for asking and starting us off really well with that segment, D. If you all are not familiar with Wendy, let me share a little bit about her. With a values and strengths based approach, Wendy helps clients redefine success, identify what they truly care about, and build the confidence to boldly pursue their career goals. For organizations, she designs effective and customized leadership development strategies through a DEI lens, lending her expertise in strong facilitation, relationship building, and strategic thinking. As a practitioner turned consultant with experience spanning healthcare, business solutions, government, energy, and tech industries, she offers a very unique approach that solves problems at the root, helping individuals and organizations flourish. Thank you again for joining us today, Wendy.
It's my pleasure. 100%.
Love it. Well, I had the opportunity, of course, to read that short little bio, but we'd love to hear from you. Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit what got you into consulting, and into the work that you're doing today.
Yeah. It's interesting you asked me this because I've been practicing kind of the framing of the story because I think it was a really powerful, pivotal moment that I experienced. And I think that a lot of people also, other people experienced during the pandemic. So I was stepping into this amazing role at the beginning of January 2020. 3 months later, pandemic happened, and very quickly we just started to see our lives just crumble or just having to reemerge doing something different. And so my role went away, and I was left thinking, okay, I thought I was stepping into a dream job, and then it got taken away from me so quickly. What does it all mean? What does it all matter if things can just disappear in a blink of an eye out of your control? It really forced me to think about what is it that I care about in my career, in my life. And I really had this visceral understanding that my career and my life aren't two separate things, that who I am as a person, I carry into my career, and how my career and the environment I'm in molds me and shapes the way I interact with my loved ones. So I had to really think about what is it that I'm really trying to pursue? What are my goals and what's important to me? And by looking at that, I really had to force myself to think about what why do I care about the things I've cared about in my career so far? And are they the right things to care about? Status, title, money, all that. What does it all matter if at the end of the day, you don't have the ones you care about around you, or you don't have a higher purpose to drive towards? So that was kind of the beginning of this journey of how can I shape my own experience in a way that fulfills me, regardless of the noise that happens outside. And then, of course, a couple months later, I was interviewing for my next role. And it was, again, a very exciting job. But I had a taste of what it was like to be independent, but I still wasn't fully ready to jump in it with both feet. So as I was on the phone with the recruiter, and I happened to be getting ready in the bathroom, so I was looking in the mirror at myself while I was on the phone, and the phone call started cheerful and spirited. And all I could think about as I stared at myself in the mirror was, please don't offer me a job. Please don't offer me a job. And I got offered the job. And I just watched myself kind of half heartedly say, yes, I'll take it. And deep down inside my heart, I knew it wasn't the thing that I really wanted to do, but I did it because it felt like it was the right thing that I had to do. Fast forward a couple years, now I'm here because I really had to again challenge myself and think, how much joy, meaning, and purpose have you developed over the last couple years doing the thing that you think you're supposed to do rather than the thing that you are meant to do? And so I said, it's time to invest in myself. It's time to invest in myself. And also, I felt like this move was symbolic. A lot of Asian Americans and a lot of just Asians. So I did not grow up here, or I wasn't even born here. So my experience as an Asian American is a little bit different than Asian Americans who were born here and grew up here. So my background was very much around, you got to grow up and you got to follow the path, whatever that meant, whatever it meant to get to a place of success, right? Success meaning you had stability, you had a flourishing career, you have a family, you have enough to eat, no worries financially. So you got to follow the stable path. And then for once, I thought, how can I make this also symbolic for my community of Asian Americans to think about, to take their step boldly for themselves? So that's, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of like the long way of going about it.
No, it sounds very meaningful. Thank you for sharing that, for sure.
Thank you.
It does. Great. So let's get into today's topic, Blair. When you learn something from people or from a culture, you accept it as a gift, and it is your lifelong commitment to preserve it and to build on it. Yo, mom. So why are we having today's conversation, Blair? We have at the Corporate Strategist, we have a session we call Belonging is Everybody's Business, but we also probably could add on one today called Allyship. Everybody needs to ally, right? And so as we talk today about today's conversation, is really understanding how each of us, especially in the Black community, need to ally, and how maybe the Asian community can stand up and be an ally to us, and vice versa. How do we need to be an ally to them when we think about the work we're doing? And some of the things we have all struggled with are some of the experiences, what are our shared experiences, and what are our differences. So we're going to have that conversation today, and chat with Wendy a little bit more about that. So Wendy, I heard this other quote, but it was by a writer, Malcolm Gladwell, and he said Asian culture has profoundly different relationship to work. It rewards people who are persistent. And so I want to talk to you, is that a stereotype, or is that true, or are there other things we should know about Asian American and Pacific Islander employees that we don't know about them?
Yeah, so I think one of the things, oh my gosh, as I'm like thinking about the answer, there's just so many different ways to go about this. So one, I think, and I think this is experienced by probably the Black community as well. So we say Asian American and Pacific Islander, it is such a huge group, right? It is such a huge group. And within that large community, there are also these nuances, okay? So we're about getting real in this conversation. So I'm just going to say it. East Asians have their own dynamic issues going on. Okay. So oftentimes people don't think about, and it's not intentional, it's just something they're not aware of or knowledgeable about. But there's history among the Chinese, the Koreans, and the Japanese historically that lends to a different dynamic today. Now, again, if everybody was born and raised in the US, that kind of changes some of the dynamic with some of that commonality of everybody we're immigrants here. But if you still look at the historical context, those three groups have some history, and not all of it was amiable, right? Not all of it was friendly. So some of that can still be reflected today in terms of how people show up with each other. So that's just a small example of how we need to pay attention to the nuances, even when we talk about a large group of Asian Americans. And then you have people in South Asia, Indians, Sri Lankans, and Malaysians, Indonesians, and Southeast Asians. And oftentimes, I think a lot of those groups of people don't even get considered as Asians. Like I've seen people talk about Indians and Chinese or Koreans and Japanese as almost two separate groups. We're part of the same continent, but we also have culturally very different experiences. And so I think we do have to pay attention to what we say and what we talk about when we talk about the experience of the Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. And I'm not even going to touch Pacific Islanders only because I know so little about that culture. There's only so much I've been able to learn the last couple of years about some of the history that went on with those groups of people. And to me, that is a very different story, and it's a very different story from mine. So I think one of the first steps is being able to understand and have the curiosity to even ask, what is relevant to these people? And I've noticed that people do walk on eggshells a little bit around me when we talk about race or ethnicity, because they're afraid to ask, are you Chinese or whatever? Personally, I don't get offended, because it shows to me that you are curious enough, you're courageous enough to ask me what my background is so that you could relate to me in a more accurate way. Now, of course, it's all about tone and context, and you could frame that in a way that may sound a little more offensive. But for the most part, when people have talked to me about race and ethnicity, I've always I've always tried to approach it with curiosity and thinking about, okay, they're wanting to know more about me. So I don't want to take it as, oh, they're making assumptions about who I am. I want you to be genuinely curious. If you don't know my background, please ask me. So that's at least how I feel. And I think for the most part, a lot of other folks in the Asian community will probably agree. Be curious, ask. Don't assume, but ask.
Well, let me ask you a question because one of the first things that came to mind when you said something about, being curious, and then you followed it up with it's about tone and context.
Sure.
Sometimes you have to be careful, but
Yeah.
sometimes, you just may be curious and want to ask. When I think about asking about identity, I think about multiracial or biracial folks that I've been around, and
Yeah.
people, they say they often get the question like, "What are you?" Uh,
Mm,
what is the best way to ask the question about your identity in a way
yeah.
that is not offensive?
That's a really good question. So, I mentioned before I didn't grow up here. So I grew up in Hungary, and I had the privilege of going to an American school that, uh, gave me the opportunity to be friends with people from across the world. And in that context, it was very much okay and accepted to say, "Where are you from?" Because everybody was from, from a different place. And then when I went to college, and I again had a different kind of audience, a different kind of community, a lot of more Americans, and I had this one American lady who once asked me, "What is your ethnicity?" And that was the first time somebody had asked me that question. It was the first time I even heard that question asked. And for a second, I was kind of confused. I was like, why would you ask me about ethnicity? Why don't you just ask me where I'm from? But then the more that I actually, um, and also different a little backstory there. So that college era, that was in Thailand. So again, I was thinking, why ask me about my ethnicity? I'm not from here. Ask me where I'm from. And then when I finally moved to the US, then I finally just start to internalize and understand, like, oh, I understand now why asking where are you from or what are you seem very charged. But what's your ethnicity or what is your ethnic background? I found to be a little more neutral. And to me, at least, and I don't want to speak for everybody, to me, at least, it shows more that you really want to know who I am and more than just bluntly saying, "What are you?"
Mm. Yeah, that's pretty rude. I mean, I think about that because there are lots of folks that may say like, "Where are your parents from?" Or you may say, "Well, I'm from San Francisco," and they're looking at you and they're making an assumption. Then they're like,
Yeah, yeah,
"Where are your parents from?" And they're like, "My parents are from Chicago," and they're like,
yeah,
"That's not what I want to know." So I love how you're suggesting
yeah,
a different way to ask that question.
yeah.
Okay, Wendy, you said we can be honest and open here. So, when we look at many pay equity reports, we're seeing that Asian Americans outperforming are getting higher pay than many of other underrepresented groups. If you were talking to an Asian American leader about being an ally to other employees within the organization, what are some of the things you would tell them to start doing or paying attention to help build that allyship and also to kind of bring together those communities in the organization that are underrepresented, so those pay equity reports look more in line with one another?
Yeah. And this is the part I think that gets really tricky because there's accountability. I think, quite a little bit of accountability on the individual leader, but then there's also accountability on the organization, right?
Mhm.
So so I know the whole pay equity, pay transparency, bucket is huge. So I'm not going to necessarily say that what I'm going to say now is going to encompass all the issues that are there. But part of, I think, why there are now a legislature in different states around pay transparency is so to equalize a level playing field so that you can't negotiate something that's $20,000 higher than somebody else because everybody knows what the range is and everyone knows the rules, so to speak, around who's supposed to pay what or what skill sets need to be paid what. That said, I know there's still room for nuances, right? If somebody really wants to hire this one talent that's really hard to find, they'll say, you know what, I'll just give them an extra 5 grand or extra 10 grand, or maybe give them a sign-on bonus that's higher than, maybe what we normally do, or maybe this one person only gets it, not everybody else. I think that's where the leaders really need to pay attention themselves. And it's really hard for leaders. I think a lot of leaders don't know how to be leaders. They were just put in that position because they're really good at what they do. But a lot of leadership is about paying attention to those details. How are you creating the culture? How are you building your business with the people that you're going to bring in? And they have to start really looking at it from the lens of not just how am I going to get momentarily the best person on my team, but what is the environment that I'm creating? If every leader looked at their team as their own unique standing business unit, I bet they'll actually pay attention differently. They'll actually pay attention more to what they're paying to their people. But a lot of leaders don't see their team as a business. They see their team as just a group of people who are doing the work for them. But they really, I think, need to look at it as this is my business that I'm owning. And I want everyone on my team to do the best work. In order to do that, I need to make sure that everyone's paid equally or everyone's paid to their skill set or to whatever is fair. And that can include, let's say, advocating for their team members. Sometimes, whatever infrastructure process they're working in, there's, they might get pushback around, oh, this person doesn't deserve a raise yet, or this person doesn't deserve this and that. And they have to be the one to be the loud person in the room to say, actually, no, based on precedents or based on past behaviors of the organization and other leaders, I think I need to advocate for this person a little harder. And they have to also be aware. I've sat in rooms with leaders doing talent reviews, and over again, they keep talking about the male individual contributors in a way that's like, okay, they're high achiever, they're so ready for this. And when it comes to women, there's always some criticism around, they're still a little too timid, they're still not speaking up more. So, and maybe it's true, maybe there is truth to it, but at the same time, as leaders, you have to pay attention to what are the patterns and themes that are coming out of these discussions. You got to have that meta awareness of what's happening and not just of what's in the moment in a discussion. So there's accountability on the leadership piece, and then there's accountability on the organization. How is the organization structured with their process infrastructure and just their talent processes that lends itself to unfair practices or make sure that each decision is made fairly. I think there's a lot that organizations can do in terms of process to do that. But I think for a lot of organizations, they're either running too quickly to stop and say, let's audit what we're doing internally. It just takes too much time. It stops a business temporarily, and it does cost a little bit of money and resources to revamp that. And so not a lot of organizations see the quick return or the benefit of doing it. And so they don't often do it. And that's why you see often a lot of startups get very competitive in that space because they had the opportunity to, maybe come up with a system that works. I'm not saying that all startups do this, but a lot of times you see that more with some of the smaller startups because they've had the time, because they can afford to build something from the ground up using best practices for equity.
Thank you. So let's go back to some of your personal experiences that could potentially influence some of these changes, right? Because I think that's a reason that we all got into this work is, like you said, it's something that happened in our lifetime. It's something that we experienced. We saw that there was unfair practices. That's how we could take it to these organizations and then paired with data and create a business case to say, this is what needs to change. So I like how you started to dive into identifying patterns, but also taking a look at policies. So those are two things. But let's talk about lived experiences. One of the things you mentioned, like in your bio and when you submitted the form, was this stereotype and this the stigma around being a model minority. And how oftentimes, especially if D'Angelo was talking about, Asian Americans are outperforming in pay, and there's this stereotype that's attached to them. Then perhaps when it comes to succession planning, they're looking for an underrepresented minority. They're looking at someone who may look like you versus someone who looks like us. Back to what D'Angelo was asking, what should organizations be paying attention to as it pertains to that model minority theory? And how has that affected your lived experience as well?
So, two things here. So in terms of the general reports around pay equity and that Asian Americans may tend to get paid more than other minority groups, I'm not questioning that. My question would be, whether the tech industries has skewed that, because tech is, I think, pretty notorious for handing out tons of cash. Maybe not today, but when when the economy was still good, they were notorious for handing out cash for retention, for whatever. And also the tech space is where a lot of Asian males tend to have thrived. So I think there's a little bit of that effect there. Now, when it comes to personal lived experience, one of the reasons I put that in my bio is because part of the experiences that I've seen, even in tech, where you would presume that Asians may be thriving, is yes, we tend to sometimes be collapsed within the group of the white community. And whether that's because as a community, we've tried to maybe even emulate and assimilate to white culture. Again, not saying whether that's good or not, but I think a lot of the Asian American immigrants have tried to do that, to just fit in and try to belong, is how do we emulate the white culture? Maybe that's part of the impact that I've seen, with some of the Asian American experience. But at the same time, we're not entirely benefiting from everything that the white community does, right? If you look at top leadership in a lot of the companies, we're not really there. You might see a lot of Asian individual contributors, even in tech, where you see a pretty big percentage of employees who are Asian men, but oftentimes they sit within the individual contributor space, and maybe some in a middle management. So there's still a little bit of that ceiling of, yes, of maybe there's some advantages for Asian community, but we're still not really benefiting. So during discussions of DEI or any kind of inclusion practices that organizations can do for their employees, I think that oftentimes they leave Asian employees out because there's this assumption that, oh, they're doing fine. There's a ton of you here, right? There's, I even had a leader tell me specifically that, oh, Asians don't count as diversity. So I've had stories of, people making assumptions or to maybe glib remarks around what they think Asian Americans are. And I think they do get lumped together with a lot of the white community, but at the same time, we're still not white. We still have that history. We still have the history of a very tainted history here in the U.S. And in many ways, I think that causes this rift between us and other minority groups, which I think is so unfortunate because we have so much more that we could have in common with. There's so much that Black leaders have done for the Asian community. If you look through history, Martin Luther King Jr., what he's done for the Chinese community, right? And there's all these different influences that I just recently learned about that Chinese people had on Southern food. I had no idea about this, but apparently there was some small influence there. Like there's some beautiful history between the different communities that we have here of minorities. And yet these stereotypes, I think, really causes this rift between us when really we could be, I think our communities should be friends. Our communities do have had a history of supporting each other. And it's just this weird thing now that I feel in the corporate space when we talk about diversity. A lot of leaders tend to think Hispanic, natives, maybe Asian Pacific Islanders, and then the Black communities. And then when it comes to Asian Americans, they're kind of like, you guys are good. You guys are good. We don't need to talk about you guys. We don't need to, make sure that you guys have a group or there are any inclusion problems. At least that's kind of the experience I've had. Now, again, because I didn't grow up here, I had a little more nuanced experience with, kind of race issues outside the US. And so in some ways, I kind of felt like, all right, fine. If that's the way it is, I'll just accept it. But the longer that I'm here, the more that I'm seeing like, hey, this is actually detrimental to a lot of us. Like a lot of us are crying on the inside because we are not seen as really white, and we're not. And we're not really seen as a minority either at times. So that's the long answer to that. I don't know if there's anything I could elaborate there or help clarify anything.
Wendy, thank you for sharing that and being so vulnerable. My main takeaway from that is that Black folks and Korean folks got together and taught each other how to fry chicken. That's what I heard. I don't know if y'all caught that.
Now that's new, but I'm not surprised. And
I believe there is some truth to that. I think I can't remember which war it was, but it was when Black folks were being drafted, and they were being drafted to Korea. This is something I got to do my own research. I did not Google this before, but this is what I heard. And they taught Korean folks how to fry chicken in a different way. And then, boom, we got Korean fried chicken.
And it's terrific. And it's terrific. So.
It is. So,
yeah,
there's some stuff there. But
that sharing and caring. I love that. All right, my shout out of the day, Blair, is Cathay Dawkins, who's the founder of BBOC, which is the Black Business Owners Corp, which is there in Charlotte, North Carolina. He's really significant with the work he's doing in Charlotte about building communities and building businesses. And he started the Black Food Truck Fridays there in Charlotte. And it has been lots of celebrities have attended, including Carla Hall, who's a celebrity chef. So kudos to Cathay Dawkins, who's doing such great work there in the Charlotte community. All right, Blair, back to you.
That's awesome. I hope you have a list of all of those shout outs, D'Angelo. We definitely need to follow up with all those people. Hey, Wendy, you did a great job today. Thank you again for sharing your lived experience and providing some knowledge based on your experiences as well as your consulting. We really appreciate that. And we appreciate every single person for joining us every single weekday at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and for watching our replays on YouTube. If you haven't already, make sure that you do donate to our cause. We are still trying to go to Afrotech to make sure that we can take the Black Diva Collective live and interview folks there as well. We appreciate you all. So thank you again for joining us every single day. The Black Diva Collective Live. Y'all have a great day.
All right. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody.
Of course.